Hi everyone, and welcome to my latest video. This one is going to be looking into something that I've become a big fan of over the past few years, namely the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is about to reach not a conclusion as such, but certainly one of its biggest milestones. When you think back to when it all started with Iron Man 10 years ago now, could Marvel themselves have ever imagined where it would go from those humble beginnings? They could never have imagined they'd be making the Avengers perhaps when they started, or maybe they did. Maybe they always had it planned, maybe they always believed in what they were doing. It certainly seems to be that there's a lot of confidence in that studio, because to do what they've done, to bring together so many different elements and threads and to keep track of them and really make them work is very impressive. Not everything they've done has worked, or not everything they've done has worked perhaps as well as I would have liked, but there can be no denying that Marvel have really managed to fashion an incredible world from fairly humble beginnings, and they've introduced things like the Guardians of the Galaxy. They've taken relatively unknown characters like Ant-Man, and, well, there's a few actually. There's also, as you can see, there's Doctor Strange, and finally Black Panther. All of these characters are, or were, relatively unknown, especially to the casual fan, as it were. If you're a hardcore Marvel fan, then yes, they're characters you would have been familiar with, but to the average person watching the movies like myself, I'd never heard of these characters before. Or if I had heard of them, I was only sort of dimly aware of them. And they've gone on to become a huge mainstay of the Marvel Universe, and in fact, integral characters. All of them really in some way are integral characters to the story, which is now coming together this year with Infinity War, which is the big payoff, if you like, for everyone that's sort of stayed together with this journey. It's impossible to guess how this film will go. It's actually part one of two, because they do plan to have a fourth Avengers film, Infinity War's part two, or whatever they're going to call it, next year. But this is going to be an epic film, and part one will no doubt shake things up quite a lot. Thanos is the big bad, as it were. He's the one that's been quietly pulling the strings for years, trying to gather together the Infinity Stones, trying to wield the ultimate power in the universe. And now we're finally going to see him in all his glory, as it were, and we're going to see exactly what he can do. And it's going to be, I think, a great film. It's something which is really, I think, a long-term labour of love for Marvel. They haven't rushed this. When they first started out with Iron Man 10 years ago, this was no doubt something where perhaps they'd always hoped they'd end up, perhaps they'd always strived to end up here. And yes, they've had to work at it. Yes, they've not always had successes. Yes, they've had some terrific successes. But I think they've never lost sight of this end game, as it were, where we're suddenly going to pull together all these different threads, all these different things from the past 10 years, some of which might seem only sort of loosely connected, are all going to be tied together in what, hopefully, and what appears to be a very satisfying way. And I, for one, am very excited by this film. I think it's going to be absolutely excellent. Marvel do tend to, especially with these bigger ensemble films, do pretty well. The first Avengers film was absolutely fantastic. Age of Ultron, okay, wasn't as good, but wasn't bad either, if you ask me. Civil War was fantastic. And I think Ragnarok was a terrific film as well, which was kind of an ensemble film in some ways. And then we're going to have this culmination of 10 years of blood, sweat and tears, both off screen and on screen. So, fingers crossed, I think this is going to be an absolutely marvellous film, and I really just can't wait for it to be the end of April when we finally get our chance to actually see this.